Out in the wilds of the South Pacific Ocean lies a primeval wilderness. On an isolated island at the far end of the world, jagged snow-capped mountains rise from the sea and pierce dense uninhabited rainforests. Over 2,000 kilometers from the nearest landmass, it is one of the most remote places on Earth. A prehistoric riot of river, mountain, steppe and rainforest, fringed by white surf. Far from arts and letters and society, stretch hundreds of kilometers of Alaskan-like wilderness, which is punctuated only occasionally by the odd ramshackle rural ghost town. In 2017, I got a reason to travel back out to this island at the far edge of the map. A position had come up to lead a crew building the epic Pike 29 mountain bike track in the Paparoa Mountains. My team was tasked with establishing a forward camp under the endless mass of trees and breaking a new trail through miles of dense rainforest surrounding an abandoned mine in New Zealand's west coast wilderness.
Anyone near to the construction here of the Pike 29 Memorial Track, please be aware that a shot will be fired in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
When I first arrived back on the island, it felt like I had met the fate of Napoleon. Once roaming the globe, now confined to a windswept rural backwater at the far end of the earth. For as long as I can remember, travel has been a part of my life. For 14 years I explored the globe while living out of a backpack. I have never owned a car, a television, or purchased any significant piece of furniture. Home was where I was on any given night. The longer you travel for, the harder it is to return to a normal life. One day you wake up and realize that the road is your permanent address. This was my life, and there was almost no going back. The job in the West Coast bush was supposed to be my attempt to return to a normal civilian life. But the lure of the traveller's life on the road was pulling me back in. I recognised that I was powerless in the face of my travel addiction, so I did the best I could under the circumstance and focused my traveller's yearning for exploration to the mountain world of the South Island. The geographical diversity of this island is remarkable. It has nearly all the natural environments in the world compressed into one island. From sandy subtropical beaches in the north to deep cold fjords in the south, 3/4 of the island is covered with mountains. The Mount Cook region has true high alpine terrain, with glaciers that scrape down off it to the high tundra in the east or the dense rainforest in the west. This video shows how to keep distracted while exploring a far-flung island lost in the South Pacific. The South Island of New Zealand. It's the traveller's longing for discovery that drives you. It's pushed me to the wildest parts of the island. wild west coast. Like a lost world cut off by mountains. 18 peaks of more than 3,000 meters form a barrier 500 kilometers long, severing off the coast from civilization. Glaciers carved down from the towering mountain tops of the Southern Alps into a forgotten realm below. Battered by violent storms and deluged with rain, it's wet season here all year round. This wild region is hundreds of kilometers from anywhere and is barely inhabited. The gold rush boomtowns, once marked with capital letters on maps, now consist of only a few old buildings lining a single illuminated street. The prehistoric rainforest is so dense that roads through it form tunnels of bush. Vines and trees stampede over each other as they strive to reach a canopy so dense it almost appears black. Large-scale settlement here is nearly impossible, owing to the pounding storms and downpours of torrential rain. Tsunamis of mud, rock and trees careen down mountain slopes and wipe away roads. Raging rivers rise up and sweep away bridges. While entire settlements are repeatedly drowned under floodwaters. Human progress here is stopped in its tracks. Main roads are constantly washed out and eventually abandoned, choked back by the advancing rainforest to single-track footpaths that snake around mature trees, past vast mudslides and dramatic rock pools. Abandoned ghost towns are gradually engulfed back into the somber forest walls. Decaying ruins of once sizable towns are swallowed by the towering multitude of trees and slowly written off the map. Rivers act as access routes that lead into the matted green interior. When you explore along them, you find tracks that peel off and penetrate the uninhabited rainforest. Once you get away from the tracks and rivers and into the less accessible terrain, you enter some of the last unknown realms, secluded by the dense bush. While roaming under the canopy, I came across a canyon with a low transparent stream. Its walls were like a tunnel of green moss, so I headed upriver to see what hidden places were waiting to be discovered. People living out here are few and far between. If you explore up the back roads, you find the odd clearing under the trees filled with moss-covered truck wrecks and a guy living in a rusty caravan, 10 dogs barking like mad in the background. This wilderness contains the greatest variety of species of anywhere in the country, and I had overheard some rumours of an elusive forest-dwelling penguin endemic to somewhere in the southern west coast region. Rarely seen, this area is comprised of several hundred kilometres of nearly impassable terrain, and the first scientific study of the species was only carried out in 2014. I came across the original study, complete with GPS coordinates and nesting areas, published on the internet. I was instantly determined to find one, so I plotted the coordinates from the study into a map and went searching. Fiordland-crested penguin lives only along the rugged coastlines of southwestland and Fiordland, and is the only penguin species which nests in the forest. As I sat at a distance and viewed him through a zoom lens, I pondered how this penguin species is the third rarest in the world, but the least well known due to the inaccessibility of their habitat. I caught wind of an expedition to explore uncharted West Coast cave systems. The entrance had just been discovered, the interior still totally unknown to the outside world. So I jumped on the motorbike and hit the road, heading up into the mountains. I joined the team and we trudged deep into the bush, colossal trees towering over us. In the middle of the primeval forest was the entrance to an unknown underworld below. We set off down into the bowels of the earth. The deeper we went underground, the stranger the rock formations we encountered. Eventually, in the depths of the cave, we reached a huge subterranean cavern. Extensive stalactites hung from the ceiling. Stalagmites and columns rose up from the floor, and pools with crystals sat on the ground in between. In the deepest part of the chamber, we discovered the bones of a giant animal that lived thousands of years ago. For millions of years, the giant moa roamed these forests. An example of island gigantism, it was the biggest bird that has ever existed. They disappeared hundreds of years ago, like other megafauna around the world, eaten into extinction when the first humans arrived on the island. These remains are a national heritage and the remnants of a lost past. Due to the threat from cave robbers, I keep extremely tight-lipped about where on the west coast we found them. A quick Google search shows that others aren't so scrupulous. Articles in the national news show someone who stumbled on moa bones and reveals the exact location where they were found. The Southern Alps are a major barrier to travel, and there are only a few high passes linking east to west. Lushly forested mountains rise abruptly from the coastal lowlands, with rivers cascading down the steep slopes. The road winds up through deep gorges. As you go over the mountain pass, you cross over the barrier dividing the island into two halves. The thick west coast rainforest suddenly gives way to high-altitude steep. Dry, cold grasslands replace the bush, and the mountain slopes are treeless, now covered by scree. Sheltered by mountains, the eastern side lies in the rain shadow of the Southern Alps, protected from the rain-bearing winds. At the base of mountain valleys, alluvial rivers fan out into high-elevation plains of expansive dry grasslands. Vivid blue lakes, once carved out by Ice Age glaciers, dissect the landscape. The biggest glaciers on the island are here, clustered beneath the highest peaks. I climbed up the Hooker Glacier underneath Mount Cook, New Zealand's highest peak. With the summit protruding 3,000 metres above the valley floor, the area looks like images from the Himalaya. There were giant rock walls with dislodged rocks and blocks of ice constantly cascading down them. Looking back up at Cook, I felt like an ant in comparison, and it gave me a renewed desire to summit it one day. This is where Hillary, the conqueror of Everest, mastered his craft. The Tasman Glacier is immense. It looks like something out of Patagonia. On the other side of Mount Cook, it winds down from the Southern Alps for 30 kilometres. 4 kilometres wide and 600 metres thick, it contains nearly 1/3 of all glacier ice in New Zealand. At the glacier's base, huge chunks of ice carve off and float out to form the iceberg-strewn Tasman Lake. Navigating through the maze of crystal blue icebergs in a kayak, I could have been in Antarctica. Cloudy rivers and canals carry fine glacial silt ground off the mountains and feed into the big southern lakes, turning them powdery blue. The road north weaves through mountain valleys and along the sides of lakes. It crosses the high barren tundra, following the mountain chain of the Southern Alps. The further you drive north, the lower the mountains become. When you reach the top of the south, they shrink down to hills, then eventually sink into the ocean. Seawater floods the river valleys, forming a network of coastal sounds. Native bush cloaks the coastline, and small rivers tumble down mossy valleys out into subtropical waters. The clear turquoise bays are reminiscent of Southeast Asia. Transparent streams meander through the jungle and feed into cool pools and glades enclosed by palm trees and ferns. Freshwater falls scatter the bays and islands surrounded by subtropical jungle. Not the rainforest inland, but palm-studded jungle like in Thailand. Native birds sing out to each other from curving tree ferns and palms overhanging sandy orange beaches. On a calm warm day in summer, you can paddle between the bays and islands to secluded beaches sheltered by palm fronds. The Hector's dolphin is endemic to this coastline. Both the smallest and rarest dolphin in the world are found upon playing in the shallow coastal waters. The sand dunes of Golden Bay are dotted with wild nikau palms, the most southerly palm trees in the world. I weave between them, drifting down the dunes on a sandboard. While I was sandboarding, a call came over the radio that there had been a mass stranding of whales on Farewell Spit. So I dropped what I was doing and shot off on the motorbike to help with the rescue. Dozens of pilot whales littered the beach, gasping for breath. Seagulls circled overhead, searching for an animal left alone so they could peck at its eyes. We covered them with blankets and doused them with water to protect them from the dry wind. Then we raced to lift them upright so they could breathe properly. All day we kept them alive as we waited for the tide to come back in. When the water was high enough, we pushed the whales back out into the ocean. I will never forget pushing back out a large female by the dorsal fin, while the calf circled around us calling to its mother. For a long time I'd been wanting to explore some of the backcountry in the top of the south, so I contacted a few of the lads from Nelson and organised a trip into the ranges out behind Marlborough. We packed all the gear into Bungo's beaten up old off-road machine.
Travelling in a freighter combi on a hippie trailhead full of zombies.
Then climbed in and followed the back roads into the mountains, searching for scree slopes to carve new lines down on mountain bikes.
She took me in and gave me breakfast. She said, "Do you come from a land down under? For women glow and men thunder. Could you hear the thunder? Let her run, let her take cover."
I was trail running out the back of Nelson, along the ridges of the Richmond Ranges. Strewn between jagged rocks, I found a garden of twisted steel. The debris of a deadly 1940s plane wreck had slammed into this remote mountain, still scattered up the alpine face. Then I hit the rivers that feed from the Nelson Lakes back out to the coast. Tourists here often like to point out that the human-built additions to the landscape do little to complement its natural beauty. No Paris of the South, New Zealand isn't about the city life. Small, grim cities abut the east coast, and lifeless rural towns decay inland amongst the mountains. Just like in the American Rust Belt, mines have closed and industry vanished, leaving the hollowed-out husks of once thriving communities. Now mostly forgotten about by the outside world, they scarcely get visited unless your car gets a flat tyre. I grew up in one insular South Island town, and as a teenager, I was quickly becoming a product of my environment.
G'day, this is Kelly McGarry documenting Raucous Acts of the Year, number 222, Tom Woodward, beer drinking scene. Shoot. Just get it done, you boy. What a machine. Yeah.
The first time I came back to New Zealand after 10 years of travelling, I went to visit an old mountain biking friend who had gone to the US and become a pro. He had moved from our hometown down south to some place called Queenstown. In stark contrast with the rest of the island's bleak towns and cities, Queenstown is cosmopolitan and bustling. When I first arrived, I couldn't believe that this place was in these islands, like a little Monaco in the South Pacific. I asked Kelly if he was ever going to move back, and he was just like, nah mate. Endowed with chairlifts, a gondola and the biggest public jumps in the world, the area is a mecca for mountain biking. It was on that trip I realised if you're going to be in New Zealand, it would be a waste of time to be anywhere else. world-class bike parks sit in every direction. You roll down the road from the jumps and take the gondola back up to the tracks from the centre of town. As winter rolls in, the rest of New Zealand becomes cold and miserable, but Queenstown is just far enough south that the rain comes down as snow, which means it's just cold. Soon after I got back to New Zealand, I realised that if you're going to be in a cold country, you just have to do it properly. So I got a snowboard and headed up into the mountains above town to hit the slopes for the first time.
Thick snow falling and settling across Queenstown overnight. Enough for Tom Woodward to get his snowboard out to get to work.
And look at this, snowboarding down the streets of tourist Mecca Queenstown as the snow fell down to sea level as it blanketing parts of the South Island.
Then, as the temperatures climb back up and the snow melts off, you head back out into these same mountains to climb, trail run, mountain bike, or kayak and freedive in the lakes and rivers. Queenstown is a launching point out into the wilds beyond. A light plane lifts you out of the lake basin and carries you over high ridges and ice plateaus, out into the wilderness hidden behind the ranges. Out here, hours from the nearest town, Cliffs rise vertically from the dark waters. Mountain peaks scrape the sky, and waterfalls plunge 1,000 metres back down from the altitudes above. Glacier-carved valleys form deep saltwater fjords, dominated on all sides by the steep walls of the snow-capped Southern Alps. Time and foot have not touched this environment. Fiordland is one of the world's remaining undiscovered realms, where new animal species still get identified. Jagged mountains stand forested to their tops. Like a lost world, the imagination can picture the last vestiges of an age long vanished. Sheer cliffs blanketed with thick forest rise straight from Milford Sound, forming a knife-edge ridge. The summit of Mitre Peak towers above the waters below. I paddled a kayak across the fjord to find a route up through the bush. The near-vertical granite cliffs of Mitre Peak form a barrier to the Simbad Gully below, where the river gushes down from the surrounding rainforest out into Milford Sound. Recently, a slew of new animals have been discovered in this valley's upper reaches. Once I emerged above the bushline, I proceeded along sheer rock walls. The climb to the top of Mitre Peak was straightforward but exposed, with the very real chance of falling all the way to the fjord far below. Spanning mountain ranges with dense forests and deep alpine lakes, parts of Fiordland resemble Norway. 14 fjords puncture the verdant coastline of over 1 million hectares of virgin rainforest. Sheer granite mountains rise from the sea to over 2,700 metres, and plunging cliffs with raging waterfalls rain back down to the inky dark waters. Exploring here requires traversing some of the island's most intractable terrain. The sheer steepness of the landscape, combined with the wettest climate in New Zealand, keeps all but the hardiest out and lets the region remain a primeval wilderness. I hauled in a paddleboard to explore some secluded mountain lakes and flooded canyons, and then freedive in their depths, with the odd avalanche popping off in the background. Driving further out of Fiordland and into the deep south, you'll eventually arrive at Land's End. Here, an expanse of water separates the South Island from a small island offshore. With nothing beyond until Antarctica, this is quite literally the end of the world. Savage winds whip in off the Southern Ocean and lash the land, twisting tree trunks into strange shapes. Heavy ocean swells churn through this narrow stretch of water, and wrecked or abandoned boats litter the coastline, victims to both the wild weather and drunken captains. The rocky shores of Foveaux Strait are notoriously dangerous. The coastal region is a ship graveyard, and wrecked or abandoned boats still lie where they met their demise, twisted and eroded by the vicious wind and waves, their splayed timber ribs revealed and reinterred by the storms. This is a place where the hands of the clock spin not forwards but backwards, where the headlands sport memorials to those lost at sea, and old factories quietly fall apart on the seaside. Stewart Island, along with the North Island, are the two diminutive offshore islands that combine with the southern mainland to form the New Zealand archipelago. The rich subantarctic waters of Foveaux Strait support a plethora of marine life. Underwater, fur seals play amongst the kelp forests clinging to the rocks, while overhead, 3-metre albatrosses soar through the skies like pterodactyls, scouring the ocean for prey. Along the beaches, 400-kilogram sea lions patrol up and down. Offshore, their predators lurk in the cool waters. This is the habitat of the legendary great white shark. I took a boat out into the water separating the two islands, put on the dive gear and climbed into the cage, ready to go eyeball to eyeball with the apex predator of the ocean. A mature great white is 6 meters long and has a mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. An isolated and far-flung mountain backwater at the edge of the map, the South Island is an adventurous wonderland. Where culture, arts and society end, the rugged, remote, ice-filled and unexplored regions begin. With diverse landscapes and exquisite natural beauty, there are still boundless prospects to climb the highest peaks and penetrate the deepest forests. And I'm looking forward to exploring it with my son.
Hey, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. As you can see by the size of the little guy here, it actually took quite a while to put that video together. If you liked it and you'd want to see more, please consider subscribing. Otherwise, please click the card on the screen or the link in the description of the video about building the Pike 29 mountain bike track on the West Coast, which was selected for the 2020 New Zealand Mountain Film Festival. Cheers.